I'm going to cut to what my father told me years ago, Brooke. Follow the flight attendants. What will they do? Will they get on this plane?
You know, I think they will. There's a lot of questions out there, and believe me, I completely understand. But I think it's worth remembering that, you know, this took 20 months. It's the longest ever grounding of a plane. So I think whatever problems there were on this jet, the FAA has found it by now. You also have to remember that, you know, this crisis was a black mark on the FAA and has raised a lot of questions about the agency's relationship with Boeing, whether it was rigorous enough in its first review of the plane. I mean, the agency was one of the last to actually ground the MAX and really sort of got shown up by China and Europe. And so, you know, they have every incentive to get this right. And so I think at this point, you can feel fairly confident that this plane is, in fact, safe. You know, we'll get our first test at the end of December. American Airlines will be the first to put this into service, is what it's looking like. They're going to fly the MAX on a Miami to New York route. So if you want to celebrate New Year's on board a MAX, you might just get your chance, Tom.
Yeah, well, Brooke, I got to say, I got to jump in here because it's almost quaint to think about some of the 737 issues. And I say that with tongue in cheek, obviously. It was a very serious issue. Yet we're dealing with the pandemic. No one wants to get on a plane on New Year's Eve, not because they're worried about the safety of the plane, but because they're worried about someone sneezing on them or having the pandemic or having the COVID-19 virus and spreading it to them. How much does this actually boost Boeing's longer-term prospects, given the drag that the pandemic has had on the entire aviation industry?
It's certainly an important milestone because it now means that Boeing can actually start delivering some of the 450 MAX jets that it built during this grounding period. But as you say, you know, it's one thing to be allowed to deliver them. It's a different thing to have customers who actually want to take those planes. And this is going to be a very difficult process. Just the way that these contracts are written with the airlines, if you have a plane that's been grounded for more than a year, the airlines have a lot of wiggle room. So they can cancel these orders or they can delay the delivery significantly. And I think a lot of carriers are just trying to wait and see what actually happens with this pandemic, because right now they still have planes in storage from the, you know, non-MAX fleet that they're operating. They don't need a bunch of new MAX deliveries coming in and dealing with everything that entails. And so this is definitely going to be a long process. It's an important first step because it at least makes it possible to deliver a MAX plane. But as you said, I just don't see a lot of carriers being interested in taking new aircraft in the near term, which is why you're not really going to be looking at Boeing generating positive free cash flow until probably 2022.
Brooke, are these computer fixes, or have they actually fixed the positioning of the engines forward or aft on the wing?
They have not changed the structural components of the airplane. So the engines are still in the same place where they were, which is why this MCAS software system that was blamed for the two crashes is still in place. Now, they are making that system safer. It's reliant now on two sensors. Those sensors have to agree before the system starts to react. And it can also only push the plane's nose down one time. So what happened in the crashes is you had erroneous readings that were setting the system off multiple times, you know, continuously pushing the nose of the plane down, setting off all kinds of alerts that just overwhelmed pilots. Another big part of this is that Boeing didn't tell the pilots about the MCAS system before the two crashes. And now, you know, I think we're all very aware of this system, but certainly the pilots are going to be, and they're going to have to do simulator training before they fly this airplane again. Now, that is significant in several ways, not just from a safety perspective, but, you know, a big selling point of this airplane for Boeing was that it was so similar to their previous 737 models, so they argued that airlines didn't have to invest in all this additional training. Now, that obviously is no longer the case, which, you know, does sort of undercut some of the appeal of this airplane.
So just quickly, Brooke, who's going to pay for that simulated training?
I would imagine that Boeing is going to pay for that. Like I said, this was sort of the sales pitch from the beginning. And so if all of a sudden you're not offering what was promised, I would imagine that a lot of that cost is going to fall on Boeing.